I never imagined that Thanksgiving morning would start with my mother's text message, "You're not welcome here anymore." Standing in my kitchen at 7 in the morning, staring at my phone screen, I felt my world collapse around me. The green bean casserole I'd spent hours preparing the night before sat on my counter enough to feed 12 people at a family gathering I was no longer invited to attend. 8 years of financial support, countless sacrificed weekends helping with home repairs, and endless emotional investment in family relationships had just been dismissed with a single brutal text. My family had chosen my golden child brother, Tyler, over me, the daughter who had quietly funded their comfortable lifestyle while they planned my permanent exclusion behind closed doors. But here's what they didn't realize as they prepared for their annual luxury Thanksgiving vacation at Serenity Springs Resort in Colorado. I wasn't just the family bank account they could discard at will. I was the one who actually owned their paradise. My hands trembled as I set down my phone and tried to process what had just happened. The green bean casserole seemed to mock me from the counter, a tangible reminder of how naive I'd been to believe I was still part of this family. I grabbed my laptop and opened social media, searching for answers about why my own mother would send such a heartless message without warning or explanation. What I found there shattered me completely. Posted just 2 hours earlier, my sister-in-law Amanda had shared a cheerful family photo with the caption, "So grateful for our family, only Thanksgiving tradition this year. Sometimes you have to protect your peace and keep toxic people away from your blessings." The comments below were even more devastating. My own father had replied, "Finally, a drama-free holiday. Should have done this years ago." My brother Tyler had added, "Family first always." Some people just don't understand what that means. The worst part was realizing this wasn't a spontaneous decision made in anger. The timestamps on various posts and comments revealed they'd been planning this exclusion for months. While I'd been contributing money to their lives and believing I was investing in our family unity, they'd been privately celebrating the prospect of cutting me out entirely. I scrolled through weeks of posts I'd somehow missed seeing references to cleaning house and protecting the family circle. My mother had even shared a quote about removing negative energy from your life, even if it comes from family. All of these posts had dozens of likes and supportive comments from relatives and family friends who clearly knew exactly what was happening while I remained completely oblivious. 8 years. That's how long I'd been the Morrison family's personal ATM, believing I was being a good daughter and sister. It started innocently enough when I landed my first major tech consulting contract right out of college. My parents were struggling with their mortgage after my father's small construction business took a hit during the economic downturn, and I was thrilled to finally be in a position to help the people who had raised me. What began as a few $100s here and there to help with utilities quickly escalated into something much more substantial. Within a year, I was covering their entire mortgage payment every month. When Tyler's first business venture failed spectacularly, leaving him buried in debt, I stepped in to pay off his creditors. When my parents wanted to renovate their kitchen, I funded the entire project. When Tyler decided to try his hand at real estate investing, I provided the down payment for his first property. Every time I wrote another check or authorized another transfer, my family expressed such heartfelt gratitude. My mother would tear up and tell me I was an angel sent from heaven. My father would pull me into bear hugs and say he was so proud of the successful woman I'd become. Tyler would promise this would be the last time he needed help, swearing he'd pay me back with interest once his latest venture took off. But the payback never came, and the requests for financial assistance never stopped. Instead, they evolved into expectations. Family dinners became strategy sessions where my parents and Tyler would present their latest financial needs like quarterly business reports. My mother would cook my favorite meal and then casually mention that their property taxes had increased. My father would show me maintenance projects around the house that desperately needed attention, but were somehow always beyond their current budget. The annual Thanksgiving tradition at Serenity Springs Resort represented the pinnacle of my financial contributions to the family. 3 years ago, when my parents suggested we start spending Thanksgiving somewhere special to create new memories, I eagerly agreed to fund the entire trip. The resort cost nearly $8,000 for a long weekend, but seeing my family relaxed and happy in that beautiful mountain setting felt worth every penny. What I didn't understand then was how they truly viewed my generosity. Now, staring at their social media posts, I could see the reality I'd been blind to for years. They'd been using a private family group chat to coordinate their manipulation of me, referring to me as the bank, and discussing the most effective ways to maintain my financial support while excluding me from actual family decisions. One screenshot that someone had apparently leaked showed Tyler writing, "Chris is so desperate to belong that she'll pay for anything. We just have to make her think she's buying family love." My mother had responded with laughing emojis and the comment, "She's always been gullible. Remember how easy it was to convince her that paying for everything was her way of showing maturity?" Reading those messages felt like being physically struck. Every genuine moment of gratitude I thought we'd shared had been an elaborate performance designed to extract more money from my bank account. Every family hug, every expression of pride in my success, every promise that they valued my presence in their lives had been carefully calculated manipulation. But the most devastating revelation was yet to come. As I continued scrolling through the leaked messages, I found evidence that my exclusion from this Thanksgiving wasn't just about wanting a peaceful holiday. It was the opening move in a larger plan to phase me out of the family entirely while maintaining access to my financial resources for as long as possible. The full scope of Tyler's manipulation became clear when my best friend Sarah called me 20 minutes after I discovered the social media posts. She'd been awake since 6 in the morning, having spent the entire night debating whether to share what she'd learned about my family's treatment of me. "Chris, I need to tell you something that's gonna hurt, but you have to know the truth," Sarah said without preamble. "Tyler has been recording your private conversations and sharing them with your parents to make you look unstable." My blood turned to ice. "What do you mean recording our conversations?" "Or remember 2 months ago when you called me crying after that family dinner, where Tyler accused you of being controlling about the money. You were so upset that you called him afterward to try to work things out." Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. "He recorded that entire phone call and edited it to make you sound unhinged. He's been doing this for months, Chris. My cousin Jake works with Tyler's friend Marcus, and Marcus has been bragging about how clever Tyler is for building a case against you." The memory of that phone call came flooding back. I'd been devastated after Tyler publicly humiliated me at dinner, claiming I was using my financial contributions to control the family's decisions. When I called him later that evening, I was crying and emotional, trying to explain that I only wanted to feel included and valued. I'd poured my heart out, admitting how lonely I felt and how much their acceptance meant to me. To learn that Tyler had been secretly recording my most vulnerable moments and weaponizing them against me felt like a violation beyond anything I could have imagined. But Sarah wasn't finished with her revelations. "There's more, Chris. Tyler has been systematically turning your parents against you by presenting your legitimate concerns about family finances as evidence that you're mentally unstable. He's convinced them that you're developing some kind of psychological dependence on controlling them through money." Sarah explained that Tyler's strategy was sophisticated and deliberate. He would record our conversations during my most emotional moments, then edit those recordings to remove all context about why I was upset. A conversation where I cried about feeling excluded from family decisions became evidence that I was having emotional breakdowns. A discussion where I expressed frustration about repeatedly lending money that never got repaid was edited to make me sound obsessed with controlling my family's financial choices. But Tyler's manipulation went far beyond just recording our conversations. Sarah had learned that he'd been intercepting and reading my text messages to our parents, then crafting responses designed to make me appear increasingly unstable and demanding. When I would send normal family communications, asking about weekend plans or holiday arrangements, Tyler would show our parents edited versions that made my messages seem demanding and entitled. He's been positioning himself to inherit everything while you fund the lifestyle, Sarah continued. Jake overheard Tyler telling Marcus that he's convinced your parents to change their will, removing you as executor and beneficiary. He actually bragged about getting your parents to cut you out of their inheritance while keeping you as their financial support system. The cruelty of Tyler's long-term strategy was breathtaking. He wasn't just stealing my money or manipulating my emotions in the moment. He was systematically destroying my relationship with our parents while ensuring that I would continue supporting them financially, all while positioning himself to inherit the very assets that my money was helping to maintain and improve. Sarah's voice became even more serious. Chris, there's something else you need to know about why they're excluding you from Thanksgiving this year. Tyler has been telling people that you've become mentally unstable and that the family is worried about your behavior becoming unpredictable or even dangerous during family gatherings. This revelation hit me like a physical blow. Not only had Tyler been recording my private conversations and manipulating our parents, but he was also spreading lies about my mental health to justify my exclusion from family events. He was creating a narrative where I was the problem that needed to be managed and eventually eliminated from their lives, all while maintaining access to my financial resources. He's been telling relatives that your emotional outbursts are getting worse and that you've been making threats about cutting off financial support if you don't get your way, Sarah continued. He's painting a picture where excluding you is a matter of family safety rather than what it really is, which is calculated financial abuse. The sophistication of Tyler's manipulation was staggering. He'd managed to turn my genuine emotional responses to being excluded and devalued into evidence of mental instability. My legitimate concerns about being taken advantage of financially were reframed as controlling behavior that justified cutting me out of family relationships while maintaining my financial contributions. But perhaps the most devastating aspect of Tyler's betrayal was how he'd convinced our parents to become active participants in his manipulation. Rather than protecting me from his lies and schemes, they had chosen to enable his behavior because they benefited from the financial arrangement he was orchestrating. As I processed everything Sarah had told me, I realized that Tyler wasn't just my manipulative brother who had taken advantage of my generosity. He was a calculating predator who had spent years systematically destroying my family relationships while positioning himself to benefit from both my ongoing financial support and my eventual complete exclusion from the family I'd been supporting all along. After hanging up with Sarah, I sat in stunned silence for nearly an hour trying to process the full scope of my family's betrayal. The green bean casserole still sat on my counter now, completely cold and somehow representing everything naive and hopeful I'd been about my place in the Morrison family hierarchy. Eventually, anger began to replace the shock and heartbreak. If my family wanted to exclude me from their lives while continuing to benefit from my financial support, they were about to learn a very expensive lesson about the consequences of their choices. I opened my laptop and began searching through my emails for the Serenity Springs Resort confirmation details. My initial plan was simple: cancel their reservation and let them figure out their own Thanksgiving accommodation arrangements. But as I dug deeper into the booking information, I discovered something that would change everything. The reservation wasn't just paid for by me. According to the email confirmations, it was actually held under my business account. 3 years ago, when Serenity Springs Resort had updated their booking system and rate structure, they'd implemented new policies for their preferred customer program. To maintain the discounted rates that made our family's annual tradition financially feasible, I'd been required to book the reservation through a business account rather than as an individual customer. At the time, creating the business account under my consulting company name had seemed like a simple administrative requirement. I'd provided my business tax identification number, signed corporate account agreements, and established the booking relationship under Morrison Consulting Solutions rather than as Chris Morrison, individual customer. What I hadn't fully understood then was the legal significance of that arrangement. The reservation wasn't just paid for by my company, it was owned by my company. Every year's booking was processed as a corporate expense. Every confirmation email was addressed to my business entity, and every aspect of the resort relationship was legally tied to my company rather than to the Morrison family. As I reviewed 3 years' worth of confirmation emails and account statements, the implications became crystal clear. My family might think of Serenity Springs as their annual tradition, but legally speaking, they had no claim to the reservation whatsoever. They were essentially guests on my corporate account with no independent relationship with the resort and no ability to modify or maintain the booking without my authorization. But this discovery led me to examine other financial arrangements I'd made for my family's benefit, and what I found there was even more revealing. Over the years, as I'd taken on larger and larger financial responsibilities for my parents and Tyler, many of those arrangements had ended up structured through my business accounts for tax and administrative efficiency reasons. The family's premium cable and entertainment package that included every sports channel and streaming service Tyler demanded. It was set up under my business account as a client entertainment expense. The country club membership that my parents used for their social activities, and Tyler used for his networking events. Also under my business account as a professional development expense. Even their upgraded car insurance policies that included premium coverage for Tyler's expensive sports car were processed through my business entity. I'd structured these arrangements through my business, partly for legitimate tax reasons, but mostly because it made the administrative aspects easier to manage. Instead of dealing with multiple personal accounts and payment schedules, I could centralize all of my family's financial support through my business systems and handle everything efficiently. But now I realized that what I'd intended as an organizational convenience had created something much more significant. I wasn't just paying for my family's lifestyle. I legally owned and controlled virtually every aspect of their financial comfort and social status. The country club membership that allowed my parents to maintain their social standing in their community wasn't actually their membership. It was my company's membership with my parents listed as authorized users. The premium entertainment services that Tyler relied on for his sports viewing and his girlfriend's streaming needs were services contracted to my business, not to Tyler personally. Most importantly, the Serenity Springs Resort reservation that represented the pinnacle of our family's annual tradition wasn't their booking at all. It was a corporate booking owned entirely by my business with my family members listed as guests rather than as account holders. As I compiled a complete list of every financial service and arrangement I'd established for my family's benefit, I began to understand the true scope of power I'd unknowingly accumulated over their lifestyle and social standing. Every comfort they enjoyed, every luxury they'd come to expect, every social connection that mattered to them was ultimately controlled by my business accounts and subject to my decisions as the account holder. This realization transformed my perspective on their decision to exclude me from Thanksgiving while expecting to maintain their financial benefits from our relationship. They weren't just taking advantage of my generosity, they were actively betraying someone who held the keys to virtually every aspect of their comfortable lifestyle. The more I dug into my financial records, the more disturbing discoveries I made. What started as an investigation into the resort booking had evolved into a comprehensive review of my family's financial behavior, and the patterns I was uncovering revealed a level of deception and theft that went far beyond simple manipulation. While reviewing my credit card statements from the past 6 months, I noticed charges that I couldn't remember making. Small purchases at first, just under amounts that would typically trigger fraud alerts or attract my attention during my usual brief monthly reviews. A dinner at an expensive steakhouse for $237. Designer clothing purchases totaling $312. Electronics and gadgets adding up to $468. Individually, these charges might have been mistaken for legitimate purchases I'd simply forgotten about. But when I examined the patterns more carefully, I realized they all occurred on dates when I was traveling for work or otherwise occupied with major projects that consumed my attention completely. The most damning evidence came when I cross-referenced the charge locations with Tyler's social media posts. Every unexplained restaurant charge corresponded perfectly with Tyler's post about amazing date nights with his girlfriend. Every clothing purchase aligned with his photos showing off new designer outfits. Every electronics charge matched his excitement about new gadgets he'd supposedly saved up for or received as early bonuses from his latest job. Tyler had been systematically stealing from me for months, using my credit card information to fund his lifestyle while I remained completely unaware of the theft. The total amount exceeded $12,000, representing the largest personal betrayal in an already devastating pattern of family deception. But discovering the theft led me to an even more disturbing realization about how Tyler had gained access to my financial information. 6 months earlier, during a particularly busy period when I was juggling multiple major consulting contracts, I'd asked Tyler to help me with some routine bill paying while I was traveling extensively for work. Tyler had volunteered to assist with organizing my mail, paying monthly bills, and handling other administrative tasks that were piling up during my absence. At the time, his offer to help had seemed like genuine brotherly support during a stressful period. I'd been grateful to have family I could trust with important responsibilities, while I focused on career opportunities that would ultimately benefit our entire family financially. Now, I understood that Tyler's helpful offer had been a calculated opportunity to gain access to my financial information and exploit my trust for his personal gain. He'd used his access to my home and mail to photograph my credit card information, memorize security codes, and gather everything he needed to begin stealing from me systematically. The sophistication of Tyler's theft was particularly galling. He deliberately kept individual charges under amounts that would trigger automatic fraud alerts from my credit card companies. He'd spaced out the fraudulent purchases to avoid creating obvious patterns that might attract my attention during my typically hurried monthly financial reviews. He'd even made legitimate small payments toward my credit card balances to prevent the accounts from becoming delinquent and prompting more detailed scrutiny from me. But Tyler's financial crimes weren't limited to credit card theft. As I continued investigating, I discovered that he'd been intercepting and redirecting my mail to hide evidence of his fraudulent activities. Several months' worth of credit card statements had never reached me, having been diverted to a post office box that Tyler had established using forged documentation, claiming to be acting on my behalf during my extensive travel periods. This mail interception had allowed Tyler to monitor my financial accounts and adjust his theft patterns to avoid detection. When credit card balances grew too high, he'd make minimum payments using funds stolen through other means. When account statements showed suspicious activity patterns, he'd temporarily reduce his fraudulent purchases until the patterns became less obvious. The criminal sophistication of Tyler's scheme was breathtaking. This wasn't impulsive theft or opportunistic fraud. It was a carefully planned and executed financial crime that had been ongoing for months, while I remained completely unaware that my own brother was systematically robbing me. But perhaps the most infuriating aspect of discovering Tyler's theft was realizing how he'd used my own generosity against me. During the same period when he was stealing thousands of dollars from my credit cards, he'd continued asking for and receiving legitimate financial assistance for various emergencies and opportunities that always seemed to require immediate cash infusions. Just 2 months earlier, Tyler had asked for a $3,000 loan to cover unexpected medical expenses for his girlfriend. I'd transferred the money immediately, no questions asked, believing I was helping my brother during a genuine crisis. Now, I realized that Tyler's supposed medical emergency had probably been fabricated, entirely designed to extract even more money from me, while he was already stealing thousands through fraudulent credit card charges. The psychological manipulation involved in Tyler's crimes was almost as disturbing as the financial theft itself. He'd managed to maintain our supposedly loving sibling relationship while actively robbing me, expressing gratitude for my legitimate financial support while secretly stealing even more through criminal means. As I sat surrounded by printed credit card statements and bank records, I began to understand that my family's betrayal wasn't just about excluding me from Thanksgiving dinner or taking advantage of my generous nature. I was the victim of systematic financial crimes perpetrated by people who claimed to love me while they methodically stole from me and planned my permanent elimination from their lives. The green bean casserole still sat on my counter, now symbolizing not just my naive hopes for family inclusion, but my complete blindness to the criminal enterprise that had been operating under my own roof with my own family members as the perpetrators. As I sat staring at the evidence of Tyler's systematic theft, my phone rang. The caller ID showed my mother's name, and for a brief moment, my heart leaped with hope that she was calling to apologize, to explain that the morning's text had been some terrible misunderstanding. I answered eagerly, desperate for any sign that my family still cared about me as more than just a source of funding, but instead of my mother's voice, I heard only silence, followed by the sound of a phone being set down without the call being disconnected. What I heard next destroyed any remaining illusions I had about my parents' role in this betrayal. Tyler, I just wanted to confirm that Chris won't be showing up at the resort to cause problems. My mother's voice came through, clearly, obviously unaware that her call had connected. The last thing we need is her making a scene in front of the other guests or trying to embarrass us publicly. Don't worry, Mom. She's way too emotional and desperate for approval to actually retaliate. Tyler's voice responded confidently. She'll probably spend the whole weekend crying and baking cookies, hoping we'll change our minds and invite her back into the family circle. My mother laughed, and the sound felt like a knife through my chest. You've done such a good job managing her over the years. I was worried she might eventually catch on to how we really feel about her constant need for attention and validation. The beauty of the whole situation is that she's so starved for family acceptance that she'll keep paying for everything even after we've made it clear she's not really welcome, Tyler continued. She's too afraid of losing us completely to actually cut off the money flow. And the recording strategy has worked perfectly, my mother added approvingly. Your father and I were skeptical at first, but hearing those conversations where she sounds so unhinged and controlling really opened our eyes to how manipulative she's become about the money. My hands were shaking so violently that I could barely hold the phone. My own mother was not only aware of Tyler's systematic manipulation, she was actively participating in it and praising his techniques for emotionally abusing me. The best part is that everyone else in the family already thinks she's become weird and obsessive about money, Tyler continued gleefully. When we eventually cut her off completely, they'll all understand that we had no choice because of her increasingly unstable behavior. Have you talked to Jennifer about protecting our assets from any potential retaliation? My mother asked, referring to my aunt who worked as a paralegal. I want to make sure that if Chris ever tries to take legal action against us, we have everything properly documented to show that her financial support was voluntary and that her exclusion was necessary for family safety. The calculating coldness in my mother's voice was devastating. Not only were my parents fully aware that their treatment of me was wrong enough to require legal protection, but they'd actually consulted with family members about how to shield themselves from consequences while continuing to exploit my financial support. Jennifer says we're completely protected as long as we can demonstrate that Chris's financial contributions were gifts rather than loans, and that her increasingly erratic behavior made it necessary to limit her access to family events. Tyler responded, "The recordings I've made will be perfect evidence if we ever need to justify our decisions." Good. I just want to make sure we're covered if she ever tries to claim that we were taking advantage of her or manipulating her emotions, my mother said. The last thing we need is her painting herself as some kind of victim when she's the one who's been using money to try to control our family relationships. The breathtaking audacity of my mother's statement left me speechless. They were worried about me painting myself as a victim, while they actively conspired to manipulate and financially abuse me. They were concerned about protecting themselves from accusations of taking advantage of me, while literally planning the continuation of that exploitation. Speaking of covering our bases, you did make sure that Chris can't interfere with our resort reservations, right? My mother continued. I know she's been handling the bookings, but she can't actually cancel our vacation just because she's upset about not being invited. Of course not, Tyler replied dismissively. She might pay for everything, but the reservations are for our family vacation. She can't just cancel other people's travel plans because she's having an emotional breakdown. The confidence in Tyler's voice made it clear that neither he nor our mother understood the actual legal structure of the resort booking or the extent of my control over their vacation arrangements. They had assumed that paying for something was different from owning it, and they were about to learn exactly how wrong that assumption was. I still think we should have gradually reduced our dependence on her money, instead of cutting her off so abruptly, my mother mused. But you're right that she was becoming too demanding about being included in family decisions and treated like an equal rather than just a source of financial support. This way is better, Tyler assured her. A clean break means we don't have to deal with her emotional neediness anymore, but we can still reach out for financial help when we really need it. She's too desperate for our approval to actually refuse us permanently. As I listened to my own family discussing their long-term strategy for exploiting me while excluding me, I realized that my parents weren't innocent victims of Tyler's manipulation. They were active, willing participants in a calculated scheme to abuse my emotions and steal my money while planning my permanent elimination from their lives. The phone call continued for several more minutes, with my mother and Tyler discussing specific strategies for maintaining access to my financial resources while minimizing contact with me personally. They talked about timing future requests for money to coincide with periods when I seemed most emotionally vulnerable. They planned ways to frame their continued exclusion of me as necessary for family peace, while ensuring that I would feel guilty enough to continue supporting them financially. By the time the call finally ended, I had recorded the entire conversation and gained devastating insight into the true nature of my family relationships. My parents weren't just enabling Tyler's manipulation, they were orchestrating it. They hadn't just failed to protect me from abuse, they were the primary architects of that abuse. I sat in my kitchen for nearly an hour after the accidentally recorded phone call ended, feeling like my entire understanding of reality had been shattered. Everything I'd believed about my family, about my place in their lives, and about the love I thought we shared had been revealed as an elaborate fiction designed to exploit my emotional needs and financial resources. Just as I was beginning to spiral into complete despair, Sarah arrived at my door unannounced, carrying a folder thick with documents and wearing the determined expression of someone who had been preparing for battle. I know you're probably feeling like your whole world has collapsed, she said as I let her in, but I need you to see something that's going to change everything. I've been documenting your family's behavior for months, and you need to understand that what's happening to you isn't just cruel, it's criminal. Sarah spread the contents of her folder across my dining room table, revealing a comprehensive collection of evidence that I never could have gathered on my own. Screenshots of the family group chat messages that someone had leaked to her. Photographs she'd taken discreetly of Tyler using credit cards that clearly weren't his. Recordings she'd made of conversations where my parents and Tyler discussed their manipulation strategies in public places where they assumed no one was paying attention. I started gathering this evidence because I could see what they were doing to you, and I knew that eventually you'd need proof of their abuse when you finally recognized it for what it was. Sarah explained, I've been watching them systematically destroy your self-worth and exploit your generosity, and I couldn't just stand by and let it continue without at least documenting the truth. The evidence Sarah had collected was far more comprehensive than anything I could have uncovered through my own investigation. She had screenshots of Tyler bragging to friends about his manipulation techniques, including detailed descriptions of how he'd gained access to my financial information and credit cards. She had photos of him using my credit cards at restaurants and stores, time-stamped and geolocated to prove the fraudulent usage patterns. But perhaps, most importantly, Sarah had recordings of conversations between my parents and other family members where they discussed their long-term strategy for maintaining my financial support while excluding me from family relationships. These recordings revealed that the manipulation wasn't limited to Tyler. It was a family-wide conspiracy that involved aunts, uncles, and cousins who were all aware of the abuse and chose to enable it rather than protect me. Your cousin Rachel has been helping Tyler coordinate the timing of his financial requests, Sarah explained, showing me text message screenshots. She's been monitoring your social media posts to identify when you seem most emotionally vulnerable, then alerting Tyler so he can time his requests for maximum effectiveness. The screenshots showed Rachel analyzing my posts about work stress, relationship difficulties, and social isolation, then reporting her findings to Tyler with recommendations about when and how he should approach me for money. She'd been treating my emotional manipulation like a strategic marketing campaign, identifying my psychological weak points and advising Tyler on how to exploit them most effectively. And your Uncle Jim has been providing Tyler with advice about how to structure the financial arrangements to make them look like legitimate gifts rather than the systematic exploitation they actually are. Sarah continued, showing me more documentation. He's been helping Tyler create paper trails that would protect your family legally if you ever tried to recover the money they've stolen. The scope of my family's conspiracy was breathtaking. This wasn't just Tyler manipulating me with my parents' passive acceptance. This was an extended family network actively collaborating to abuse and exploit me while creating legal protections for themselves in case I ever discovered their true intentions. Sarah's folder also contained evidence that other family friends had noticed the dysfunction but chose to remain silent rather than risk their own relationships with my parents and Tyler. Several people had expressed concerns privately about how my family treated me, but none of them had been willing to warn me or offer support when I needed it most. I know this is overwhelming, Sarah said gently, but I want you to understand that you're not crazy, you're not oversensitive, and you're not imagining the abuse. What your family has been doing to you is textbook financial and emotional abuse, and there are legal remedies available to protect you and recover what they've stolen. Sarah's sister Jennifer, who worked as a family law attorney, had reviewed all of the evidence and provided preliminary legal analysis of my options. According to Jennifer's assessment, Tyler's credit card fraud constituted multiple felonies that could result in significant prison time. My parents' participation in the conspiracy made them potentially liable for both criminal and civil penalties. But beyond the legal implications, Jennifer had identified numerous financial arrangements that were structured in ways that gave me far more power than my family realized. The business accounts I'd used to streamline my financial support weren't just convenient administrative tools. They were legal structures that gave me complete control over virtually every aspect of my family's lifestyle. Jennifer says you have options ranging from complete criminal prosecution to negotiated settlements that would require full restitution and accountability without necessarily destroying the family permanently, Sarah explained. But the key thing is that you have real power here. You're not a helpless victim. You're someone who's been systematically abused, but who holds all the cards if you choose to use them. As Sarah walked me through the evidence and legal analysis, I began to understand that my family's decision to exclude me from Thanksgiving while expecting to maintain their financial benefits wasn't just morally wrong. It was a massive strategic error that had exposed them to criminal prosecution and civil liability while giving me comprehensive legal and financial leverage to demand justice and accountability. The beautiful irony, Sarah concluded, is that their greed and cruelty have put them in a position where they're completely dependent on your mercy. They think they're discarding you while keeping your money, but legally speaking, they've just handed you the power to destroy their lives or force them to completely change their behavior. Armed with Sarah's evidence and Jennifer's legal analysis, I spent the next several hours developing a comprehensive strategy for responding to my family's betrayal. This wasn't going to be an emotional outburst or a reactionary decision made in anger. It was going to be a carefully planned response that would teach my family about the real-world consequences of financial abuse and manipulation. The first priority was understanding the timeline constraints I was working with. Sarah's monitoring of the family group chat revealed that they had left for Colorado 2 days earlier than their usual departure time, driven by Tyler's paranoia about potential last-minute drama from me. Tyler convinced your parents to leave early because he was worried you might figure out what was happening and try to interfere with their vacation, Sarah explained, showing me the relevant chat screenshots. He actually wrote, "We should get to the resort as soon as possible in case Chris has one of her emotional breakdowns and tries to ruin our trip." This early departure actually worked in my favor in several important ways. First, it meant they were already committed to the trip and had invested time and money in traveling to Colorado, making the cancellation of their resort reservation far more impactful than it would have been if they were still at home. Second, it demonstrated their confidence that I was too emotionally devastated to retaliate, effectively proving that they had completely underestimated my capabilities and legal position. But most importantly, their early departure meant they would arrive at Serenity Springs Resort expecting to check into their luxury accommodations during the busiest travel weekend of the year, with no backup plans and no available alternatives within a reasonable driving distance. Jennifer had researched the resort availability situation in the Colorado mountain region during Thanksgiving weekend, and the results were exactly what I'd hoped for. Every luxury resort boutique hotel and even mid-range accommodation within 200 miles of Serenity Springs was completely booked. The few places that might have last-minute cancellations were budget motels and roadside inns that would represent a dramatic downgrade from the luxury mountain resort experience my family had come to expect and feel entitled to. As I developed my strategy, I realized that simply canceling their resort reservation, while satisfying in the short term, wouldn't address the larger patterns of abuse and exploitation that had been ongoing for years. If I wanted to create lasting change in my family relationships and prevent future manipulation, I needed to systematically address every aspect of the financial arrangements that enabled their behavior. Sarah helped me create a comprehensive inventory of every account membership service and financial arrangement that I controlled, but that my family benefited from. The list was far longer and more significant than I'd realized, representing nearly every aspect of their comfortable lifestyle and social standing. Beyond the Serenity Springs Resort reservation, my business accounts controlled their country club membership, their premium entertainment packages, their upgraded insurance policies, their credit card benefits, and even some of their utility services that I'd taken over during previous financial emergencies. Over the years, my desire to help and my business's need for legitimate tax deductions had created a web of dependencies that my family took for granted, but that I could legally modify or cancel at any time. But I also had to consider the legal and ethical implications of my response. Jennifer had been clear that while I had the legal right to cancel services and memberships that were held under my business accounts, any actions I took needed to be defensible as legitimate business decisions rather than purely retaliatory measures. The key is documenting your legitimate business reasons for making these changes, Jennifer had advised. As long as you can show that your decisions are based on sound business practices or justified by their breach of trust, you'll be protected legally even if the practical effect is devastating to their lifestyle. This guidance led me to develop a phased response strategy that would escalate systematically while maintaining legal protections. The resort cancellation would be immediate and dramatic, serving as a wake-up call that would force my family to recognize the reality of their situation. Follow-up cancellations of other services would be implemented over the following weeks, each one tied to legitimate business justifications, but creating cumulative pressure for accountability and change. I also had to plan for my family's likely responses to each phase of my strategy. Based on the evidence Sarah had collected, Tyler's initial reaction would probably be to attempt some form of fraud or deception to restore their canceled services. My parents would likely try emotional manipulation, attempting to guilt me into reversing my decisions by claiming I was overreacting or punishing innocent family members. But I was also prepared for the possibility that my family might escalate their retaliation, potentially attempting to damage my reputation, my business relationships, or my emotional well-being in response to losing their financial benefits. Sarah and Jennifer had helped me develop protective strategies for each of these scenarios, including documentation procedures, communication protocols, and legal responses that would protect me while maintaining pressure for accountability. As evening approached and I finalized my strategic plan, I realized that my family's attempt to discard me while maintaining their financial benefits had inadvertently given me something I'd never had before: complete clarity about their true priorities and values, combined with comprehensive legal and financial leverage to demand better treatment. The green bean casserole still sat on my counter, now representing not my naive hopes for inclusion, but my determination to ensure that anyone who wanted to benefit from my generosity would have to treat me with basic respect and honesty. Tomorrow, my family would begin learning about the real-world consequences of financial abuse, and I was ready to teach them. I woke up on Thanksgiving morning with a clarity of purpose that I hadn't felt in years. While most families were preparing for gatherings filled with gratitude and connection, I was about to deliver a long overdue lesson about respect and consequences to people who had systematically abused my trust and generosity. My family would be arriving at Serenity Springs Resort in approximately 3 hours, expecting to check into their luxury mountain suite and begin their family-only Thanksgiving celebration. They had spent the drive to Colorado congratulating themselves on successfully excluding me while maintaining access to my financial resources. They were about to discover how catastrophically they had miscalculated their position. I called Serenity Springs Resort at exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, knowing that their guest services team would be fully staffed and prepared to handle the busy Thanksgiving weekend check-in process. The resort manager, David, recognized my voice immediately from our previous interactions over the past 3 years. "Good morning, Miss Morrison. I hope you're having a wonderful Thanksgiving," David said warmly. "I wanted to let you know that we have everything prepared for your family's arrival this afternoon. The mountain suite is ready, and we've arranged the special dietary accommodations you requested for your brother." The irony of David's cheerful hospitality wasn't lost on me. He was treating me with the respect and appreciation that my own family had never shown, despite years of my financial support enabling their comfortable lifestyle. Actually, David, I need to cancel the Morrison family's reservation effective immediately, I said, keeping my voice calm and professional. There have been some significant changes in our family situation, and I'll no longer be providing accommodations for their travels. There was a brief pause as David processed this unexpected development. I'm so sorry to hear that, Miss Morrison. Of course, we can process the cancellation. Since you're the business account holder, you have full authority to make changes to any reservations. Should I expect a replacement booking from your company for the weekend? No replacement booking will be necessary, I replied, but I do want to ensure that when the Morrison family arrives expecting to check in, they're handled with appropriate professionalism. They may not be aware that the reservation has been canceled. What happened next revealed information that made Tyler's betrayal even worse than I'd initially understood. David's voice became more serious as he accessed the account details. Actually, Miss Morrison, I need to inform you of something unusual that happened earlier this week, David said carefully. Someone identifying himself as Tyler Morrison called on Monday, attempting to transfer the reservation from your business account to his personal name. We explained that such transfers require written authorization from the account holder and your physical presence to verify identity, but he became quite agitated during the call. My blood pressure spiked as David continued his explanation. The caller made several disparaging comments about you personally and suggested that you were mentally unstable and might try to interfere with the family's vacation arrangements. He claimed he was trying to protect the reservation from potential cancellation due to your alleged psychological problems. Tyler's attempted reservation theft proved that his manipulation and fraud weren't limited to stealing my credit card information. He had actually tried to gain legal control of the resort booking, presumably to protect their vacation arrangements from exactly the type of cancellation I was now implementing. We documented the entire interaction in our security system, David continued. The caller's behavior was inappropriate enough that we flagged the account for special attention. We've dealt with family disputes before, but his comments about your mental health and his demands for immediate reservation transfers raised some concerns about potential fraud. This information was invaluable for several reasons. First, it provided additional evidence of Tyler's criminal intent and his systematic attempts to steal services that belonged to my business. Second, it demonstrated that resort staff had already identified Tyler as potentially problematic, making them more likely to handle his arrival appropriately. Most importantly, it gave me confidence that my decision to cancel the reservation was not only legally justified, but actually necessary to prevent further fraud attempts. I appreciate you documenting that interaction, David, I said. Tyler Morrison is not authorized to make any changes to reservations held under my business account, and any future attempts to modify bookings should be reported as potential fraud. Absolutely, Miss Morrison. We take security very seriously here, David replied. Should we also flag the family members to prevent them from attempting to book new accommodations using your business information? That would be very helpful, I confirmed. None of the Morrison family members are authorized representatives of my business, and any attempts to use my company's information for booking purposes should be declined. As David processed the cancellation, he provided additional details that made my family's situation even more dire than I'd anticipated. Thanksgiving weekend was not just busy for Serenity Springs, it was completely sold out throughout the entire Colorado Mountain Resort region. Every comparable luxury accommodation within a 200-mile radius was fully booked with waiting lists for potential cancellations. I hate to say this, but if your family is expecting to find alternative luxury accommodations for this weekend, they're going to be extremely disappointed, David said sympathetically. We've been referring overflow guests to properties in Denver, but even those are mostly booked at this point. The practical implications were exactly what I'd hoped for. My family would arrive expecting their luxury mountain suite and instead find themselves stranded in Colorado with no comparable alternatives available. They would have to choose between driving several hours back home in defeat or accepting whatever budget accommodations they might be able to find in the area. But Tyler's attempted fraud had created an additional benefit I hadn't anticipated. Because resort security had flagged his behavior as potentially problematic, they would be prepared to handle the family's arrival with extra attention and documentation. Any inappropriate behavior or demands they made would be carefully recorded, potentially providing additional evidence for future legal proceedings. David, when the family arrives this afternoon, I'd appreciate if you could let them know that their reservation was canceled due to unauthorized attempts to transfer the booking without proper authorization, I said. They should understand that their exclusion is a direct result of fraudulent activity rather than any kind of family dispute. Of course, Miss Morrison, we'll handle the situation professionally and ensure they understand the business reasons for the cancellation, David confirmed. Is there anything else we can do to assist with this situation? As I finished the call with David, I realized that my family's attempted manipulation of the resort booking had backfired spectacularly. Not only had they failed to gain control of the reservation, but their fraudulent attempts had actually made the cancellation more justified and created additional legal evidence of their criminal behavior. My family would spend Thanksgiving weekend learning that their financial abuse and manipulation had real consequences, and Tyler would discover that his attempts to commit fraud had been documented by security professionals who took such behavior very seriously. With the resort reservation successfully canceled and my family's arrival documented as a security concern, I turned my attention to the broader network of services and memberships that I controlled through my business accounts. Sarah had helped me realize that the resort cancellation, while dramatic, was just the beginning of what needed to be a comprehensive response to years of systematic financial abuse. Over the next several hours, I methodically contacted every organization and service provider where my family benefited from arrangements that I had established and funded through my business. Each call was professionally handled with clear business justifications for the changes I was implementing, but the cumulative effect would dismantle virtually every aspect of my family's comfortable lifestyle. The country club membership was the first significant cancellation beyond the resort reservation. Pine Valley Country Club had been my family's social hub for the past 4 years, providing them with golf privileges, dining access, and the social connections that my parents valued for their retirement activities, and that Tyler used for his networking and dating opportunities. When I called Pine Valley's membership office, the manager immediately recognized the Morrison Consulting Solutions account as one of their most reliable corporate members. My company had maintained the family membership without a single late payment or policy violation, making us a valued client that they were sorry to lose. We're so sorry to hear that Morrison Consulting will be discontinuing the membership, Miss Morrison, the manager said as she processed the cancellation. Your account has been exemplary and your family members have been wonderful guests. Is there anything we can do to retain your business? Unfortunately, there have been some significant changes in our family situation that make it necessary to discontinue services that were primarily benefiting family members rather than serving legitimate business purposes, I explained. We need to restructure our corporate expenses to focus more directly on business development activities. The business justification was completely legitimate. Using corporate funds to provide country club access for family members had always been a questionable expense allocation, defensible only because I occasionally use the club facilities for client meetings and networking events. With the family relationship deteriorating, continuing to fund their social activities would be impossible to justify during any business audit or tax review. But the practical impact on my family would be devastating. My father had built his entire retirement social life around daily golf games and club dining with his friend group. My mother had become deeply involved in the club's charity committees and social events, using her membership status to maintain her position in the local social hierarchy. Tyler had been using the club facilities to impress dates and business contacts, presenting himself as successful and well-connected based on access that my money had provided. The cancellation would be effective immediately with their membership cards deactivated by the end of the business day. Any charges they attempted to make over the weekend would be declined, creating immediate embarrassment and forcing them to acknowledge the reality of their financial dependence on my generosity. Next, I contacted their premium entertainment service provider to cancel the comprehensive package that provided Tyler with every sports channel premium movie network and streaming service he demanded. This cancellation would eliminate their access to the playoff games Tyler had been planning to watch throughout the weekend, along with all of the streaming content that had become central to their daily entertainment routine. The insurance modifications were more complex, but potentially more impactful. My business had been paying for umbrella policies and coverage upgrades that provided my family with far better protection than they could have afforded on their own. Tyler's expensive sports car was insured through premium coverage that protected him from major financial liability in case of accidents, while my parents enjoyed enhanced homeowners coverage that protected their property and assets comprehensively. While I couldn't cancel their basic insurance coverage without potentially creating legal problems, I could downgrade their policies to standard coverage levels that they would be responsible for funding themselves. The cost difference would represent hundreds of dollars in additional monthly expenses that they would have to absorb immediately. But perhaps the most significant cancellation involved a service arrangement that I hadn't even remembered making until I reviewed my complete business expense records. 2 years earlier, when my parents were struggling with increased utility costs during a particularly harsh winter, I had arranged for my business to take over their heating and electrical service accounts as a corporate expense. The arrangement had been justified as providing temporary assistance during a family financial emergency, but it had never been switched back to their personal responsibility when their situation improved. For 2 years, my business had been quietly paying several $100s monthly for their basic utilities, an expense that represented a significant portion of their fixed living costs. Canceling the utility arrangement wouldn't leave them without heat or electricity, but it would require them to immediately resume personal financial responsibility for services they had stopped thinking about paying for. They would need to contact the utility companies, establish new personal accounts, pay deposits and connection fees, and assume monthly payment obligations that they hadn't budgeted for in years. Each cancellation I implemented was legally justified and professionally handled, but the cumulative effect was designed to force my family to confront the full scope of their financial dependence on my generosity. They had taken for granted that their comfortable lifestyle was sustainable while treating me with contempt and exclusion, and they were about to discover how wrong that assumption had been. As I completed the final cancellation calls, I realized that my family's decision to exclude me from Thanksgiving while expecting to maintain their financial benefits had exposed them to consequences far beyond just missing their luxury resort vacation. They were about to lose access to virtually every comfort and convenience that elevated their lifestyle above basic subsistence level. The beautiful irony was that they had created this vulnerability themselves through years of accepting my financial support while planning my permanent exclusion. They had become completely dependent on generosity from someone they were systematically abusing, and now they would learn exactly how expensive that abuse had become. By Friday evening, my phone started ringing with increasing frequency as my family began experiencing the full impact of my systematic response to their years of financial abuse. The first call came from my father, whose voice carried a mixture of confusion, anger, and barely concealed panic that I had never heard before. "Chris, what the hell is going on with our resort reservation?" he demanded without any greeting or acknowledgement of the cruel text message my mother had sent just 24 hours earlier. We're sitting in some roadside motel that smells like cigarettes and mildew because Serenity Springs claims our reservation was canceled. This has to be some kind of mistake. The absence of any apology or recognition of their treatment of me was telling. Even facing the consequences of their actions, my father's first instinct was to demand that I fix their problems rather than acknowledge their role in creating them. "There's no mistake, Dad," I replied calmly. "The reservation was canceled because Tyler attempted to commit fraud by trying to transfer a booking that belongs to my business into his personal name. The resort documented his inappropriate behavior and flagged the account for security reasons." "That's ridiculous," my father sputtered. "Tyler was just trying to help manage the family vacation arrangements. You can't seriously be punishing the whole family because of some administrative misunderstanding." The fact that my father characterized Tyler's attempted theft as an administrative misunderstanding revealed how deeply my family's denial and entitlement had become embedded in their thinking. They genuinely believed that Tyler had the right to steal services that belonged to my business and that I was being unreasonable for protecting my own property from fraudulent appropriation. But my father's call was just the beginning of my family's increasingly desperate attempts to restore their canceled services and comfortable lifestyle. Over the next several hours, Tyler made multiple attempts to resolve the resort situation, using increasingly deceptive and ultimately criminal methods. Sarah's monitoring of the family group chat revealed that Tyler's first strategy involved attempting to book alternative accommodations using credit cards that I now knew he had been using fraudulently for months. When those cards were declined due to his excessive unauthorized usage, Tyler became increasingly frantic about finding ways to salvage their vacation experience. His desperation led him to make what would prove to be a catastrophic error in judgment. Using a voice-changing application on his phone, Tyler called Serenity Springs Resort, pretending to be me attempting to reinstate the canceled reservation through identity fraud. David called me within an hour of Tyler's fraudulent impersonation attempt, his voice professional but clearly concerned about the escalating security situation surrounding my family's booking. "Miss Morrison, I need to inform you of a very serious development regarding your canceled reservation," David said carefully. "Someone called our resort this evening claiming to be you and demanding that we reinstate the Morrison family booking. However, our security protocols require identity verification for any account changes, and the caller was unable to answer basic verification questions correctly." As David explained the details of Tyler's failed impersonation attempt, the criminal sophistication of my brother's behavior became even more disturbing. Tyler had attempted to provide my social security number, my business tax identification number, and other personal information that he had clearly stolen during his previous access to my financial records. The caller became increasingly agitated when our security questions revealed that he wasn't actually the account holder, David continued. He began making threats about legal action and claimed that we would be responsible for ruining his family's vacation. We immediately flagged his phone number in our security system and documented the entire interaction as a potential fraud case. Tyler's threats during the failed impersonation call had crossed the line from family manipulation into criminal behavior that could result in serious legal consequences. Attempted identity theft fraud and making threats against business employees were federal crimes that prosecutors actively pursued, especially when the evidence was as clear and well documented as Tyler's phone call to the resort. "We take these security breaches very seriously, Miss Morrison," David explained. "We'll be filing a report with local law enforcement about the attempted fraud, and we wanted you to be aware that someone is actively trying to use your identity for unauthorized purposes." This development transformed my family situation from a private dispute about financial boundaries into a criminal matter that would involve law enforcement investigation. Tyler's desperation to restore their luxury vacation had led him to commit serious felonies that were now documented by security professionals and would be investigated by authorities who specialized in fraud prosecution. But Tyler's criminal behavior didn't stop with the failed resort impersonation. As other canceled services began affecting their daily routine, Tyler made additional fraudulent attempts to restore access using stolen information and deceptive techniques that only deepened his legal exposure. When my parents discovered that their country club access had been terminated, Tyler called Pine Valley Country Club, claiming to be my business partner and demanding immediate restoration of the membership. However, the club's membership director had been specifically warned about potential fraud attempts, and Tyler's call was immediately identified as unauthorized and potentially criminal. The entertainment service cancellation prompted Tyler to attempt another impersonation call this time, claiming to be my accountant with authority to reverse the service termination. But the customer service representative requested business verification information that Tyler couldn't provide, leading to another documented fraud attempt that would be reported to authorities. Each failed fraud attempt created additional evidence of Tyler's criminal intent while demonstrating his complete inability to understand that his manipulative techniques wouldn't work with security-conscious businesses that maintained proper verification protocols. By Saturday morning, my family was trapped in Colorado with no luxury accommodations, no entertainment services, and a growing trail of documented criminal activity that Tyler had created through his increasingly desperate attempts to maintain their comfortable lifestyle through fraudulent means. The family group chat messages that Sarah continued monitoring revealed my parents' growing panic as they realized that Tyler's behavior had escalated their situation from a family dispute into a potential criminal investigation that could destroy their remaining financial security and social standing. On Saturday morning, Jennifer called me with news that would transform my understanding of Tyler's criminal behavior and my legal options for addressing his years of systematic fraud. Her investigation into the evidence Sarah had collected had uncovered a pattern of identity theft that extended far beyond my family situation into federal crime territory. "Chris, I need you to sit down before I explain what we've discovered," Jennifer said, her voice carrying the serious tone she reserved for major legal developments. "Tyler's financial crimes aren't limited to stealing from your credit cards and attempting to defraud the resort. We've found evidence that he's been using your personal information to apply for unauthorized credit accounts." The credit monitoring service that Jennifer had helped me activate revealed multiple inquiries on my credit report that I had never authorized or initiated. Over the past year, Tyler had used my social security number, employment information, and other stolen personal data to apply for credit cards, personal loans, and even a car lease that I knew nothing about. "The pattern shows at least 7 unauthorized credit applications submitted using your identity," Jennifer explained. "Most of them were declined because your existing credit utilization was already high due to Tyler's fraudulent charges on your legitimate accounts, but 2 applications were approved, creating accounts that Tyler has been using without your knowledge." The discovery of unauthorized credit accounts meant that Tyler's financial crimes had evolved from theft of my existing resources into large-scale identity theft that created entirely new sources of fraudulent funding. He had essentially stolen my financial identity to create his own private credit system using my creditworthiness to fund his lifestyle while I remained completely unaware of the account's existence. But the legal implications extended far beyond the financial damages Tyler had caused. Jennifer explained that identity theft for credit fraud was a federal crime that carried potential prison sentences of up to 15 years, especially when the pattern showed systematic and ongoing criminal activity rather than isolated incidents. The federal prosecutors in this district actively pursue identity theft cases, particularly when there's clear evidence of systematic criminal behavior, Jennifer continued. Tyler's pattern of fraudulent credit applications, combined with the attempted resort fraud and the documented impersonation attempts, creates a compelling case for serious federal charges. The resort's security report had been forwarded to the appropriate federal authorities, who were now investigating Tyler's attempted identity theft as part of a broader pattern of criminal behavior. The documented phone calls, the attempted credit applications, and the systematic theft from my legitimate accounts all contributed to a comprehensive criminal case that could result in Tyler's imprisonment and permanent criminal record. But Jennifer had also discovered that my parents' knowledge of Tyler's criminal behavior made them potentially liable as accessories to his federal crimes. The accidentally recorded phone conversation where my mother discussed Tyler's manipulation strategies provided evidence that she was aware of his fraudulent activities and had actively participated in planning his continued exploitation of my financial resources. Under federal law, anyone who knowingly assists or encourages identity theft can be charged as an accessory to the crime, Jennifer explained. Your parents' recorded conversations show they were aware of Tyler's theft and manipulation, making them potentially liable for criminal prosecution as well as civil liability for damages. This legal development meant that my family's financial abuse wasn't just a private matter that I could resolve through personal boundaries and service cancellations. It was a federal criminal conspiracy that could result in prison sentences for Tyler and my parents, along with permanent criminal records that would affect their employment, housing, and financial opportunities for the rest of their lives. But Jennifer also explained that I had significant leverage in determining how aggressively these crimes would be prosecuted. While law enforcement would investigate the reported fraud attempts regardless of my preferences, my cooperation and willingness to provide evidence would be crucial for building the strongest possible criminal case. You have options ranging from full criminal prosecution that could result in serious prison time for Tyler and potential charges for your parents to negotiated resolutions that could include restitution, community service, and supervise accountability without necessarily destroying their lives permanently, Jennifer said. The choice between criminal prosecution and negotiated resolution would depend on my family's willingness to acknowledge their behavior, make complete financial restitution, and accept ongoing accountability measures that would prevent future abuse. The key advantage you have is that Tyler's criminal behavior has created undeniable evidence of systematic fraud that your family can't dispute or minimize, Jennifer continued. They can either accept responsibility and work toward making things right, or they can face the full consequences of federal criminal prosecution. But Tyler's crimes had also created immediate practical problems that required urgent attention. The unauthorized credit accounts he had opened using my identity were generating monthly payment obligations and potentially affecting my credit score. The fraudulent applications he had submitted were creating ongoing security risks that needed to be addressed through credit monitoring and fraud alert services. Jennifer helped me contact the major credit reporting agencies to place fraud alerts on my accounts and begin the process of disputing the unauthorized credit applications. We also initiated identity theft reports with law enforcement agencies and financial institutions to document the full scope of Tyler's criminal activity. As we worked through the administrative requirements for addressing identity theft, I realized that Tyler's desperation to maintain his fraudulent lifestyle had inadvertently provided me with comprehensive legal leverage that extended far beyond what I had initially understood. My family had spent years systematically abusing my trust and generosity while planning my permanent exclusion from their lives. Now they faced a choice between accepting complete accountability for their behavior or confronting federal criminal charges that could destroy their future opportunities and financial security permanently. The green bean casserole had long since been thrown away, but it had been replaced with something far more valuable: legal documentation of systematic criminal abuse and the power to demand either justice or genuine accountability from people who had treated my love and generosity as weaknesses to be exploited. By Sunday morning, my family's situation had deteriorated beyond anything they could have imagined when they smugly excluded me from their Thanksgiving celebration. The cascade of canceled services combined with Tyler's escalating criminal behavior and its legal consequences had created a crisis that threatened not just their vacation plans, but their long-term financial stability and legal security. The first sign that my parents were beginning to understand the seriousness of their situation came through a series of panicked phone calls from creditors and financial institutions. The unauthorized credit accounts that Tyler had opened using my stolen identity were beginning to generate consequences that affected my parents as Tyler's emergency contacts and potential co-signers. Sarah's monitoring of family communications revealed that my parents had received calls from 3 different credit card companies inquiring about Tyler's fraudulent applications and requesting verification of information that he had provided using my identity. When the companies discovered that Tyler wasn't authorized to use my personal information for credit applications, they immediately flagged the accounts as potential fraud and began collection procedures for any outstanding balances. But the most devastating revelation for my parents came when they realized that Tyler's criminal behavior extended beyond just stealing from me. During their desperate weekend in Colorado, they discovered that Tyler had also been systematically stealing from their own accounts using the same techniques he had perfected through months of defrauding me. The discovery occurred when my parents attempted to use their debit cards to pay for their extended motel stay and found that their checking account had insufficient funds despite my father's recent Social Security deposit. When they called their bank to investigate the discrepancy, they learned that Tyler had been making unauthorized withdrawals from their account for several months. Tyler had gained access to their banking information through the same helpful assistance he had provided during their financial emergencies, using his access to their mail and financial records to steal their debit card information and online banking credentials. The total theft from their accounts exceeded $4,000, representing a significant portion of their monthly retirement income. The bank's fraud investigation revealed that Tyler had been deliberately timing his thefts to coincide with periods when his parents were distracted by travel or health issues, ensuring that the missing funds wouldn't be noticed immediately. He had also been making small, legitimate deposits to their accounts, occasionally creating confusion about their actual balances and making it more difficult for them to recognize the systematic theft. My parents' phone call to me that evening was completely different in tone from their previous angry demands for restoration of their canceled services. My mother's voice was broken and desperate, in a way I had never heard before, stripped of the entitled confidence that had characterized her previous communications. "Chris, we need to talk to you about Tyler," my mother said, barely able to control her trembling voice. "We've discovered some things about his behavior that we never knew about, and we're scared about what's going to happen to our family." For the first time in years, my mother sounded like she was speaking to me as her daughter, rather than as the family ATM machine. The desperation in her voice revealed that she was finally beginning to understand the true scope of Tyler's criminal behavior and its potential consequences for everyone involved. "We had no idea that Tyler was stealing from us too," my mother continued. "We thought his problems were limited to being irresponsible with money, but we're realizing that he's been systematically defrauding all of us for months." The revelation that Tyler had been stealing from his own parents while they enabled his abuse of me created a devastating psychological crisis for my parents. They were forced to confront the reality that their golden child son was a criminal who felt no loyalty or affection for anyone in his family, viewing us all simply as sources of funding for his desired lifestyle. But my parents' panic intensified dramatically when they received a visit from federal investigators who were following up on the resort's fraud report and the identity theft complaints that Jennifer had filed on my behalf. The investigators explained that Tyler's pattern of criminal behavior constituted serious federal offenses that could result in substantial prison sentences. The FBI agents told us that Tyler could be facing 15 to 20 years in federal prison if he's convicted of all the charges they're investigating, my father said during a separate phone call later that evening. They also said that we could be charged as accessories if they can prove we knew about his criminal behavior and helped him continue it. The federal investigation had uncovered additional evidence of Tyler's criminal activities that even I hadn't been aware of. His fraudulent credit applications had triggered automated fraud detection systems that revealed a pattern of identity theft affecting multiple victims beyond just me. Tyler had apparently been using stolen personal information from several sources to fund his lifestyle, making him a target for comprehensive federal prosecution as a serial identity thief. But perhaps the most terrifying revelation for my parents was learning that their financial dependence on my generosity had created legal vulnerabilities that could destroy their remaining assets and security. The investigators explained that proceeds from criminal activity could be subject to asset forfeiture, potentially including property and resources that had been purchased or maintained using stolen funds. They said that because Tyler used stolen money to help pay for household expenses and family activities, some of our assets could be considered proceeds of criminal activity. My mother explained through tears. We could lose our house, our retirement savings, everything we've worked for because we didn't realize Tyler was funding his contributions to the family through criminal theft. The legal complexity of untangling years of financial arrangements where criminal proceeds had been mixed with legitimate resources created a nightmare scenario for my parents. They faced potential loss of their home, their retirement security, and their social standing, all because they had enabled Tyler's criminal behavior while systematically abusing the daughter who could have protected them from his manipulation. As my parents processed the full scope of the crisis Tyler's criminal behavior had created, they began to understand that their treatment of me wasn't just morally wrong, but had been strategically catastrophic for their own security and well-being. They had chosen to enable and protect a criminal son while alienating and abusing the daughter who had provided honest financial support and could have offered legal protection from Tyler's schemes. Now they face potential criminal prosecution, asset forfeiture, and social humiliation, all while having destroyed their relationship with the one family member who might have been willing to help them navigate the crisis. On Monday morning, exactly 4 days after receiving my mother's cruel Thanksgiving exclusion text, my phone rang with her number displayed on the screen. This time, however, her voice carried none of the entitled anger that had characterized previous calls. Instead, I heard the broken, desperate tone of someone who had finally recognized the full scope of the crisis her family's behavior had created. "Chris, please don't hang up," my mother began, her voice thick with tears. "I need to tell you how sorry I am for everything we've done to you, and I need to beg for your help in figuring out how to fix this horrible mess." For a brief moment, hearing my mother's genuine remorse and desperation, I felt the familiar pull of my old patterns of forgiveness and enabling. But I had learned too much about manipulation and emotional abuse over the past few days to allow myself to be drawn back into their dysfunction without clear evidence of genuine accountability. "I'm willing to listen, Mom," I replied carefully, "but I need you to understand that apologies aren't enough anymore. The things that Tyler has done and the ways that you and Dad have enabled and participated in his abuse have created serious legal and financial consequences that can't be resolved with just words." I know, my mother said, her voice breaking completely. "The FBI agents explained everything to us, and we finally understand how terrible Tyler's behavior has been. But Chris, there's something else I need to tell you that makes everything even worse." What my mother revealed next completely shattered any remaining illusions I might have had about my family's capacity for honesty and accountability. In her desperation to secure my help with their legal crisis, she accidentally disclosed information that proved Tyler's criminal behavior had been far more extensive and calculating than even I had realized. Tyler hasn't just been stealing from you and from us, my mother continued through her sobs. He's been stealing from his girlfriend Amanda's family too, and from some of his coworkers, and probably from other people we don't even know about yet. The FBI agent said he's been running a whole criminal enterprise using stolen identities and fraudulent credit applications. But the most devastating revelation was yet to come. As my mother tried to explain the full scope of Tyler's criminal activities, she accidentally admitted that she and my father had been aware of his theft from multiple sources for over a year. We knew something was wrong when Tyler suddenly had so much money to spend on expensive dinners and clothes, but we were afraid to confront him because we thought we might lose both of our children if we pushed too hard, my mother confessed. We told ourselves that maybe he was just being irresponsible with credit cards, and we hoped that if we could keep getting financial help from you, we could cover for his mistakes until he grew out of his bad behavior. The admission that my parents had known about Tyler's criminal behavior for over a year, while continuing to enable it and blame me for being controlling about money, was breathtaking in its cruelty and stupidity. They had chosen to protect a son they knew was a criminal, while systematically abusing a daughter they knew was honest and generous. We never realized that by covering for Tyler and accepting his contributions to family expenses, we were helping him hide the proceeds of criminal activity, my mother continued. The lawyers say that makes us accessories to his crimes and that we could go to prison too. But my mother's confessions revealed something even more disturbing about Tyler's systematic manipulation of our entire family. She explained that Tyler had been deliberately creating financial crises for my parents that would require my intervention, ensuring that I would continue providing money that he could steal while maintaining the appearance of being a helpful son. Tyler would secretly create problems with our bills or expenses, then offer to help us ask you for money to solve the problems he had created, my mother admitted. He convinced us that you wanted to feel needed and important, so asking for your help was actually good for your emotional well-being. The psychological sophistication of Tyler's manipulation was staggering. He had been systematically creating artificial financial emergencies that would trigger my protective instincts and generous nature, ensuring a steady flow of resources that he could steal while painting himself as a caring son who was helping to manage family communications with their difficult daughter. He told us that you were becoming obsessed with controlling the family through money, and that the best way to manage your behavior was to make you feel important by asking for financial help while limiting your actual involvement in family decisions. My mother continued, this revelation explained so much about the psychological torture I had endured over recent years, feeling like I was never quite welcome or valued despite my continuous financial support. Tyler had been deliberately orchestrating situations where I would feel needed enough to continue providing money, but excluded enough to prevent me from recognizing the patterns of abuse and theft. The FBI agents made us understand that Tyler doesn't care about any of us. My mother said, her voice hollow with devastation. He's been treating his entire family like victims to be exploited, and we helped him do it because we were too scared and stupid to protect ourselves or you. As my mother's confessions continued, I realized that Tyler's abuse hadn't just targeted me individually. He had been systematically manipulating and exploiting every member of our family while creating an environment where we would turn against each other, rather than recognizing him as the source of our problems. The accidentally recorded phone conversation Tyler's criminal activities And now my mother's desperate confessions had revealed the full scope of a sophisticated psychological and financial abuse operation that had been ongoing for years. My family hadn't just been ungrateful or thoughtlessly cruel in their treatment of me. They had been active participants in a criminal conspiracy orchestrated by Tyler designed to maximize his access to stolen resources while minimizing the risk of detection or accountability. Now faced with federal criminal charges and potential asset forfeiture, they were finally ready to acknowledge the truth about Tyler's behavior and their own complicity in enabling his crimes. After listening to my mother's devastating confessions and desperate pleas for forgiveness, I took 24 hours to consult with Jennifer and carefully consider my options for resolving the crisis Tyler's criminal behavior had created. The choice I made would determine not just my family's immediate future, but whether they would have any opportunity to rebuild their lives and relationships based on honesty and accountability rather than manipulation and abuse. Jennifer had outlined the stark alternatives facing my family with clinical precision. Full criminal prosecution would likely result in Tyler serving 10 to 15 years in federal prison for identity theft and fraud, while my parents would face potential charges as accessories to his crimes. Asset forfeiture could claim their home retirement savings and any other property that had been maintained using proceeds from Tyler's criminal activities. The federal prosecutors have a strong case, and Tyler's pattern of criminal behavior is exactly the type that typically receives the maximum allowable sentences, Jennifer explained. Your family would be financially destroyed and socially humiliated, but justice would certainly be served. But Jennifer also explained that my cooperation and willingness to provide evidence was crucial for building the strongest possible criminal case. If I chose to advocate for a negotiated resolution instead of maximum prosecution, the federal authorities would likely be willing to consider alternatives that included comprehensive restitution and accountability without necessarily destroying my family's lives permanently. The key advantage you have is that Tyler's criminal behavior has created undeniable evidence that your family can't dispute or minimize, Jennifer continued. They have no choice but to accept whatever terms you're willing to offer because the alternative is complete financial and legal destruction. After careful consideration, I decided to offer my family a choice that would test their genuine commitment to accountability and change. They could face the full consequences of federal criminal prosecution, or they could accept a comprehensive settlement agreement that would require complete honesty, full restitution, and permanent accountability measures to prevent future abuse. I called a family meeting at my parents' house for Tuesday evening, bringing Jennifer as my legal representative and Sarah as my emotional support. The contrast between this gathering and our typical family interactions was profound. Instead of my parents and Tyler presenting their financial needs while I quietly wrote checks, I was now the one presenting terms for their survival and redemption. I want to start by making sure everyone understands exactly what Tyler's criminal behavior has cost me financially and emotionally. I began reading from a comprehensive accounting that Jennifer had helped me prepare. The direct theft from my credit cards totals $12,467. The unauthorized credit applications using my stolen identity created additional liability of $8,312. The emotional distress and administrative costs of dealing with identity theft add several thousand more. Tyler sat slumped in his chair, no longer able to maintain the arrogant confidence that had characterized his previous interactions with me. The federal investigation had stripped away all of his manipulative defenses, leaving him exposed as exactly what he was: a criminal who had systematically abused everyone who trusted him. Beyond the direct financial theft, Tyler's manipulation and your complicity in his abuse has cost me years of emotional trauma-damaged self-esteem and the loss of family relationships that I value deeply, I continued. These damages are impossible to calculate precisely, but they represent harm that will take years of therapy and personal work to fully heal. My parents sat holding hands, tears streaming down both of their faces as they confronted the full scope of the damage their choices had caused. They had enabled Tyler's criminal behavior while systematically abusing the daughter who had supported them financially and emotionally for 8 years. "You have a choice," I said, presenting them with the settlement agreement Jennifer had prepared. "You can accept complete accountability for Tyler's crimes and your complicity agree to full financial restitution and commit to permanent behavioral changes with legal enforcement, or you can face federal criminal prosecution and the complete destruction of your financial security and social standing." The settlement agreement was comprehensive and non-negotiable. Tyler would plead guilty to federal identity theft and fraud charges, accepting a suspended sentence that included 5 years of probation, community service, and mandatory restitution payments. My parents would admit their complicity in writing, undergo counseling for financial abuse patterns, and accept permanent restrictions on accessing my financial resources. "All stolen money will be repaid in full, with interest according to a court-supervised payment schedule," I continued. "Tyler will have no access to credit cards, loans, or financial accounts without court supervision. Any violation of these terms will trigger immediate criminal prosecution with no further opportunities for negotiated resolution." But the settlement agreement also included positive elements designed to rebuild our family relationships on a foundation of mutual respect and honesty. My parents would attend family therapy sessions focused on financial abuse, recovery, learning to recognize and change the dysfunctional patterns that had enabled Tyler's criminal behavior. Tyler would undergo psychological evaluation and treatment for personality disorders and criminal thinking patterns. "If you complete all requirements of this agreement and demonstrate genuine change over a period of 5 years, we can begin rebuilding our family relationships gradually and carefully," I explained, "but those relationships will be based on mutual respect and honest communication, not on financial dependency and emotional manipulation." My family's response to the settlement offer was immediate and unanimous. They accepted every term without question or negotiation, understanding that my willingness to offer any alternative to complete criminal prosecution represented extraordinary mercy, given the scope of their abuse. Tyler signed the agreement with shaking hands, finally understanding that his criminal behavior had consequences he couldn't manipulate or avoid. My parents embraced the opportunity to make amends for their role in enabling his abuse while learning to build healthy family relationships for the first time in years. The federal prosecutors accepted the negotiated settlement as appropriate, given my family's cooperation and commitment to accountability. Tyler's criminal record would permanently document his identity theft and fraud, but the supervised restitution plan offered him an opportunity to rebuild his life based on honest work rather than continued criminal activity. As we signed the final paperwork, I realized that my family's attempt to exclude me from Thanksgiving while maintaining access to my financial resources had ultimately forced them to confront the criminal dysfunction that had been poisoning our relationships for years. They had learned that love and generosity couldn't be separated from respect and honesty, and that financial support came with legitimate expectations of accountability and appreciation. 6 months after that devastating Thanksgiving morning text message, I sat in my newly decorated apartment, preparing for a small Thanksgiving dinner with friends who had become my chosen family. The green bean casserole was gone, replaced by dishes that represented authentic relationships built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine care for each other's well-being, rather than financial dependency. The transformation in my life had been profound and healing in ways I never could have imagined when I first discovered the full scope of my family's betrayal. The legal settlement had provided complete financial restitution for Tyler's theft, but more importantly, it had created a framework for rebuilding family relationships based on honesty and accountability rather than manipulation and exploitation. Tyler had completed 4 months of court-ordered community service and was making steady progress in his supervised restitution payments. More significantly, his mandatory psychological counseling had helped him recognize the extent of his criminal thinking patterns and their devastating impact on everyone who had tried to love and support him. His latest letter to me included a detailed acknowledgement of his abuse and a genuine commitment to earning forgiveness through changed behavior rather than manipulative words. I finally understand that my criminal behavior wasn't just about stealing money, Tyler had written. I was stealing your trust, your self-respect, and your ability to believe in family love. I can't undo the damage I caused, but I can commit to becoming someone worthy of the sister who gave me so many opportunities to be better. My parents had embraced their court-ordered family therapy with surprising enthusiasm, using their sessions to examine decades of dysfunctional relationship patterns that had created the environment where Tyler's abuse could flourish unchallenged. They were learning to communicate directly and honestly rather than through manipulation and guilt, and to offer emotional support that wasn't contingent on financial arrangements. We're finally learning how to be parents instead of just people who expected their children to manage their problems. My mother had explained during our first supervised family dinner 3 months after the settlement. We never realized how much we had failed you by accepting your generosity without giving you the respect and appreciation you deserved in return. The supervised family meetings had revealed how profoundly my parents' enabling of Tyler's abuse had damaged their own relationship with each other, as well as with their children. They were now attending couples counseling to address communication patterns and financial management issues that had made them vulnerable to manipulation and exploitation. But perhaps the most meaningful transformation had been in my own understanding of love boundaries and self-worth. The months of therapy following my family's betrayal had helped me recognize how my desperate need for family acceptance had made me vulnerable to systematic abuse. I had learned that genuine love includes accountability and respect, and that enabling someone's worst behaviors isn't actually caring for them at all. You gave your family the gift of consequences, my therapist had explained. By refusing to continue enabling Tyler's criminal behavior and your parents' complicity, you forced them to confront the reality of their choices and gave them an opportunity to become better people. The lesson had been painful but transformative. Sometimes the most loving action is holding people accountable for their behavior rather than protecting them from the natural consequences of their choices. My family had needed to experience the full impact of their criminal abuse and manipulation before they could begin building healthier relationships based on honesty and mutual respect. My chosen family dinner included Sarah and Jennifer, whose support and expertise had been crucial for navigating the legal and emotional complexities of addressing systematic family abuse. It also included colleagues from my consulting business who had become genuine friends and neighbors who valued my friendship for who I was, rather than what I could provide financially. As I looked around my table at people who appreciated my presence, rather than just my financial resources, I felt a peace and contentment that I had never experienced during years of trying to buy family love through constant financial sacrifice. The mountain resort reservation that had started this whole journey remained canceled permanently, but instead of funding luxury vacations for people who treated me with contempt, I had used that money to invest in therapy, legal protection, and experiences with people who genuinely valued our relationships. My family's exclusion from Thanksgiving dinner had been intended as cruel punishment for my supposed controlling behavior about money. Instead, it had become the catalyst for recognizing and addressing years of criminal financial abuse, while building authentic relationships based on mutual respect and honest communication. Tyler's attempt to steal my identity and resources had backfired spectacularly, exposing him as a criminal and forcing him to face consequences that were teaching him accountability for the first time in his life. My parents' enabling of his abuse had cost them their comfortable lifestyle and social standing, but it had also given them an opportunity to learn healthier relationship patterns that could provide genuine fulfillment rather than shallow dependency. I had learned that family relationships, like all meaningful connections, require mutual respect, honest communication, and shared responsibility for each other's well-being. People who wanted to benefit from my generosity would need to treat me with basic dignity and appreciation, and anyone who chose to abuse my trust would face immediate and comprehensive consequences. The most important lesson from this experience was understanding that setting boundaries isn't about being controlling or vindictive. It's about creating conditions where healthy relationships can flourish, while protecting yourself from people who would exploit your kindness for their personal gain. As I served dinner to friends who had earned their place at my table through genuine care and mutual support, I realized that my family's attempt to discard me while keeping my money had actually given me the gift of discovering what real love and appreciation looked like. True family isn't about blood relationships or financial arrangements. It's about people who value your presence in their lives, who support your well-being without exploiting your resources, and who treat your generosity as a privilege to be respected, rather than an entitlement to be demanded. My family's cruel Thanksgiving exclusion had ended their access to my financial support, but it had also opened the door to relationships based on authentic love and mutual respect, and that transformation had made this the most meaningful Thanksgiving of my life. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who were taking advantage of your generosity? I'd love to hear about your experiences with protecting yourself while still maintaining hope for healthier relationships. Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if it resonated with your own journey toward authentic family connections. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming financial abuse and building relationships based on mutual respect, and share this with anyone who might need encouragement to stand up for themselves when family love comes with too high a price. Thank you for joining me on this difficult but ultimately healing journey, and I wish you all the courage to demand the respect and appreciation you deserve in every relationship that matters to you.